Sunday morning, and it promises to be a wonderful morning. We've got Michael Johnston and Blaze Ward here today, and we have this black box that is Tom Whitmore. Now, since those of you who are used to having Tom, just look at the black box, imagine intelligent words coming out, kind questions, and generally just wonderful thoughts. And while you're imagining all of that, you've got me. Okay. And so, like I said, we're lucky today. We have Blaze Ward and we have Michael Johnston. Now, you may have been following on my Facebook. You'll notice I put out a link to Michael Johnston's work. Some really good-looking stuff. But we're here today to talk about space opera. Now, just so you know, you can see that image that I have covering Michael's face. That is actually $5.99. I don't know why Amazon's link says $2.99, but you can only say it's Amazon and shrug. But anyway, I see. I've managed. Okay, so we have Karen's desk and file cabinet. Karen, are you there with the kitty, or are you just there to keep Tom?
Yes, I'm here. Is this better?
Oh, good.
Can you actually hear me now?
This means Tom having a little trouble hearing you.
All right, I need to change the volume a little bit. Sorry about this, everyone.
Kick it up just, days like that when I'm needing to make it go up just a small amount, I tend to almost go back to my native vernacular.
Both volumes.
Okay, I see Michael has found. Weird bit. Bob and Tom are just glitches to me. The audio was fine, but the video is fragmented.
Well, the audio is what people care about anyway.
So, good morning, America. You're seeing us at our best as we figure out technology. You know, you'll notice Tom had to go get on Karen's computer, and now he's the only one that looks, that's coming across good, I think. So I should just go away and let you guys do it. So, Blaze, while we're waiting to hear from Tom, tell us about the space opera.
Talking about what? You chopped on me. And he's drinking. Hi, Tom. Your audio's okay. Come up about.
What was that? I did.
So you say space opera is where ships fly through space singing?
No. Space opera is where you have your classic stories set in space, but the stakes are huge and get bigger with every book as you go down the line. You and I were talking earlier about Doc Smith and both the Skylark books and the Lensman books. By the end of the Lensman books, they're sending out 1 million fleets of warships to attack one planet. And you think about that and you go, okay, how many people is that? How many ships is that? How huge is that when you're destroying planets? Because he blew up planets long before the Death Star ever came around. So, for me, space opera is the opera flavor. Space adventure is something more like Star Trek, where it's just mission or monster of the week. And things don't get any crazier. But space opera, every book, gotta be bigger. Gotta be huger. The stakes keeps going up. Eventually, you're slaying gods.
So, not to be falling back on classics, but I guess it is a classic now at my age. But Star Wars is a space opera, huh?
Absolutely.
And Lord of the Rings is not.
Well, it's an opera, but it's a fantasy opera.
Yeah, it's not space.
You compare it to like Star Trek TOS or Next Gen, those are generally just space adventure. Every week we move forward, but we don't get bigger.
So big. You like? What do you think, Michael?
I would agree with that. The space operas tend to have huge galaxy-shattering or even universe-shattering plot lines.
So like Dune is space opera.
Absolutely.
Cool. Tom, how you doing?
Well, I think I'm here.
All right. Well, if you're in, Michael, it is a pleasure meeting you, and I'll chat with you guys a little bit towards the end of the show when I come back in to.
Did he just freeze on you guys?
Yeah, he did. Well, let's continue without him. He's trying to leave. So, all right, we're talking about space opera as being large. It contains multitudes. And one of the things that led me to want to talk with both of you about this is one part about Dr. Smith as the architect of space opera.
Yep.
But in terms of that, is space opera always conservative?
Conservative?
In politics?
I don't think so. I don't know that isn't entirely orthogonal when you get right down to it. Because Star Wars was all about defeating an evil empire and bringing freedom to the galaxy, and that's not exactly what you would classify as conservative politics. Michael?
In some ways, but certainly Doc Smith, you're rooting for the police.
Well, absolutely. But in Doc's case, you're rooting for the police against the gangsters that want to enslave everybody and destroy civilization. So I'm not sure that falls into your classical right-left dichotomy.
So
It's also the different approach to things.
Somebody in the chat asked if Firefly counts as a space opera or a sci-fi adventure. I would say that Firefly counts as an adventure and Serenity as a space opera.
Maybe. If they'd have run 3 or 4 seasons, I would have expected them to up things and turned into a full-on big war. So they were aiming for opera, but they never got there. And when I write space opera, I'm usually sticking it to the man, so I'm more like Star Wars than Lensman.
Okay.
There are big, bad, evil, ugly people out there, and they must be stopped. Not necessarily destroyed, although in my Jessica Keller books, I killed a god in book 8 and still had a book 9 to write.
How about you, Michael? What's your thought on that?
You glitched on me. Could you repeat that question?
What your thoughts are?
I'm sorry?
Stop it.
Can you hear us?
Not well. You're talking still about the Firefly or the conservative liberal?
We're talking about both of them. Talk about both.
I think over time, things have changed. So early space operas, I think, were a little more kind of conservative, status quo, the government's always the good guys kind of things. And more recently, we've started seeing less centralized government, more liberal values in the space opera. And I think it's just changing with the times.
Yet we still have people like Peter Hamilton, who's a very conservative writer, very conservative political person, and writing really amazing space operas.
Yeah. Too.
It's interesting because he's conservative, but for example, when I read the Ninth Dawn series, to me it didn't read as very conservative. I was surprised to find out he was a conservative person himself, because to me the characters and the solutions they found seemed very based in liberal ideas. Especially the ending was very, we must all join together and learn to grow up and all that kind of stuff.
Space opera, to some extent, was named out of the famous Vast Galaxy. They compared a Western day science fiction movie with exactly the same things going on. But the way we're talking about space opera is definitely different from that. Now, Liam Westcott asks, can space opera be small in scope? Does it have to be grand-sweeping, galaxy-acting? On the whole, if it's space opera, it's got to be erotic. Huge.
I don't know necessarily agree entirely. The scope has to be everything, but it can be small in the sense of it's just going to destroy your world or your friends, your little tribe, without necessarily destroying the whole world. Space opera tends to be big because you got the whole damn galaxy to play with. But you could do space opera set in a non-FTL here on Earth. Most of the World War III type stories were all opera. They're just not set in space, but they could have been. I like writing big things because I can do big things with them. Michael, did you see the question from the Facebook user?
I do, and I got to be honest, that's a little more out of my pay grade.
Well, the whole idea here is none of us have pay grades. I'm sure we can come up with some sort of reasonable answer.
I would suggest that space opera, in terms of, now I've just totally lost my thought. Never mind, ignore me.
In terms of space opera being big, in terms of space opera being
Big, scale-wise.
So you're saying, among other things, that space opera means a faster than light ride.
The way it's written by everybody assumes galaxy, which assumes space travel. Are you guys getting the feedback I'm getting?
Yes.
Yeah, you vanished.
I vanished?
Your sound vanished.
Oh, so FTL allows you to play in big things, but you could, if you didn't have FTL, set something here on our solar system. You just need a lot of civilizations competing against each other. So the step beyond colonizing Saturn, or the moons of Saturn and Jupiter.
Or even...
Yeah, the Expanse I would call space opera. And it's, until later books, almost entirely in the Sol system.
Yeah. Sorry, Richard. We're getting it too.
Yep.
Yeah. For some reasons, everything is glitchy. With any luck, you don't have them again.
And Roberta, absolutely, Babylon 5 is about as opera as you can get, especially if you look at the movies that got tacked on to the end of the series run. Huge. Civilizations being destroyed or overthrown. Species possibly being wiped out. Big.
Genocide on a big scale.
Yeah. It's always fun how much of science fiction is really just takes all the stories that were Westerns, and how many of all those stories you go back and those are samurai and fantasy stories. You just change the technology a little bit. I always try and be real careful about that point, not go down some of those tropes.
Well, it all goes back to the Iliad and Odyssey.
Absolutely.
It's not significant, not back to Gilgamesh and further.
Yeah, Gilgamesh was an uncompleted opera, though, so.
Yes. Well, they didn't have the music. I'm really surprised nobody's done Gilgamesh as an opera.
I mean, I'm sure there's a black box of it somewhere.
Mm-hmm. But what really is the appeal of space operas? Is it just making things bigger?
I think it's the ability to dream. Dream. The ability to dream.
Okay.
Star Trek. Yeah, but Star Trek was going out there and finding interesting people.
Mm-hmm. The Odyssey.
The Odyssey, absolutely. Going out there and defeating evil, which is really the Lensman boiled all the way down. Michael?
I'm having a hard time fighting through this squawking. Yeah, there's also the element in the Odyssey of finding your way home, which was kind of the central story of my trilogy. Yeah, that too. Finding a place in the universe, finding where you stand, that kind of thing.
So, space opera then basically starts with Doc Smith and Lensman starts back in 1986.
As far as I remember from my research, Skylark of Space, which was his previous series, is the first published quote-unquote science fiction book that actually travels outside the solar system without like magic to other planets or planes and sorts of things, but actually traveling to other worlds outside. Because at that point they had just discovered better the shape of the galaxy. They thought that the universe was just a flat filled with stars, and it's like, no, there's galaxies. So he was exploring that in the early Skylark books.
Yeah. But that's very early on in the development of science fiction as we know it.
Absolutely, I consider him foundational.
Yeah.
He in the
November
20s.
1926 for the amazing appearance of the Persians.
Yep.
Yes, and the cover that everyone thinks of was the Buck Rogers cover was actually for Skylark in Space.
Yep. I love reading the Skylark books. They're horribly dated and a little questionable in terms of civilization and ethics and that, but when you realize that Doc was born in 1888, it makes a little more sense.
It's also interesting that he used a trope which shows up a lot in a lot of anime of the person who is the villain in the earlier books turns into something very much like a hero.
Yeah, I don't know that Mark became a hero by the end. He's kind of a fellow traveler because we have to defeat the Clorians to save humanity, and then I'm going to go off and conquer my own empire once I'm done with you people.
Yeah, but he did end up doing really strongly good things.
He's lawful evil as opposed to chaotic evil, I'll give you that. He was always the most fun character, though, because he says, look, I don't trust you people, you're idiots, you're doing it all wrong, but right now I have to use you, and I'll make a deal with you. And he keeps the deals.
Yeah. Yes, one of the problems with a lot of politics in our world is people don't keep their deals.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then when you get to Lensman, the Bosconians are just simply flat evil, and they're going to conquer and destroy and enslave everybody. So there is no dealing with them. It must be genocidal from the word go.
Mm-hmm. But an interesting way, Vortex Blaster subverts that to some extent, because what is seen to be the loose atomic vortices turns out not to be at all.
Yeah.
Dr.
Brian.
Smith understood more about ambiguity than people give it credit for.
And I consider him, like I said, foundational to modern science fiction because he established so many of the tropes and the themes that everybody else would explore over the last 100 years. Ooh, the fuzz just faded out.
Always good when the fuzz fade out. That's even though we like Dr. Smith, we like it when the fuzz fade out.
Not for me, though.
Sorry.
It's interesting in the sound that I'm hearing is not what you're saying. It sounds like it's coming from something else.
Can't tell.
I hate this thing is wrong for it to be us. So, why write it? Why do you want that sort of show? Makes it fun. Isn't it more fun to just explore who people are and why they do things than it is to try to destroy the entire galaxy?
The measure of your hero is the depth, strength, and interestingness of your villain. If you don't have a really great villain for your hero to rise up against and resist and thwart, then the story's not all that impressive. Star Wars works because Darth Vader is Darth Vader. Skylark works because Mark Duquesne never bends from being that honorable asshole that he is from the get-go. I like writing characters because I start with characters and then I put them in a setting and then I give them a problem in that priority list. I write a lot of military science fiction, a lot of military space opera, because I grew up on TOS.
Yeah, I imprinted early on Star Wars and things like Battlestar Galactica, so that big epic scope is just into my system. But I really like being able to play with things that are sort of disguised versions of Earth. You can approach things without beating the reader over the head with it by changing the people that it's attached to. So I can talk about LGBT issues, or I can talk about racism or post-colonial ideas, and have it not bogged down by Earth baggage, but still get the idea across.
That's the joy of science fiction. We can talk about the present tense and camouflage it enough to make people stop and think and ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
And
I never set out to tell, when I'm telling a story, I'm not setting out to be like, I'm going to get a reader to think about racism. But I'm telling a story that is, I want it on the big canvas because that's what I like, that's what I find fun. So I want to find those readers who also find it fun. But then sneak in that stuff.
absolutely. And for me, I write what I write because after an Oricon about 9 years ago, I was in the bookstore. They would do that signing after Oricon, and I was early because I was helping them set up, and I had 3 hours walking around the shelves with money burning a hole in my pocket, and I could not find any book I wanted to buy and read. And my wife says, "Great, so write it."
Yeah.
And that became Oberon, which became the beginning of the Jessica Keller books. And that's military, epic, grand space opera.
That's a different and interesting take. Not all space opera is military.
Look, can be if you're but yeah.
Cosmic Engineers by Syntax is definitely space opera, but it's not military.
Yeah. depends on your starting point. If you're writing something that's more like an Edisonade, then you're going to have the Skylark books where some young genius scientist invents a new thing that lets him go do these explorations. Cool. I sound like a crow?
Yes, well, that just means you're about 20 years out of date as opposed to 50 like me. Crazy, I think it's a crow. Shows you what I know.
I like telling stories. I tell fantasy, I tell occult detective, I tell urban fantasy, I tell cyberpunk, I tell space opera. I have the most fun with space opera because it lets me do the most to subvert tropes without the reader realizing it until after I've grabbed them and dragged them to the bottom of the lake.
A disturbing image.
Visually, if you let the reader surf, you might put the book down and never pick it up again. You don't want them to put the book down.
Hey,
And
the rental takes you to the bottom of the lake. You know you're taking.
yep. And then I get with a big enough canvas to paint on. My current series that I'm working on, Corsac Fox, starts with the heroine's journey instead of the hero's journey. And 3/4 of book one is things keep getting worse, they keep getting farther from home, they keep getting deeper in trouble before they finally develop enough agency to break out and start taking control of their own destiny. And then it's going to be more books before they even get to a good point. Ouch.
How is the different from the journey?
So in the heroine's journey, and it isn't necessarily female, but Gail Carriger did a fantastic book on it. The main character starts off by pretty much losing everything in the sense of they lose their family, they lose their connection, they're driven out, and they have to spend their time recreating their family, their clan, their tribe with strangers. So it's very much found family. Instead of the hero is the guy who comes to town and must save the world. Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, is very much hero's journey. By the end, he has grown so much he can never return home. Heroine's journey, all the main character wants is to return to a home, not necessarily the one they had. But that's the whole found family aspect of it.
But Frodo, at the end, goes into the rest.
Because he can no longer return to the Shire. Tom actually has the heroine's journey because he's able to come home.
Yeah.
He has grown and learned, but he has family. He gets the wife, he gets the daughter, he gets the friends. Frodo cannot do that because the king on his vast throne must be isolated. So he goes to the rest with the elves. Like I said, I love Gail Carriger's book. It really sets it up and goes, ooh, that's a totally different way to tell a story. I want to try that.
What's the title?
I'd have to, let me bounce out here. I can't type that fast. It's simply The Heroine's Journey, and it's Gail Carriger. Let me throw this into the chat, because I don't know if you have a way to show it to everybody.
I don't, but Bob knows how to do that. I have no idea.
Carriger is spelled Carriger. Gail, Gail.
Yeah.
The Heroine's Journey. And she's a really neat lady if you ever get a chance to meet her.
I think I have. Yeah. Interesting hearing your voice.
I only heard her that she'd said something. I didn't pick out any actual syllables.
She said we met her at Baycon.
Oh, cool.
Yes. Being distracted.
Okay.
We have a brand new kitten who's one eye.
Friend.
Karen. Where's the kitty?
Just a second, and I'll.
Is this the pirate kitty?
Yes, her name is Anne Bonny.
Awesome.
Yes, she was found in the County here in Washington, and she's really quite a bit. Very
She's a cute.
intelligent.
Good.
But with any luck, I'll bring her on the show. So, anyway, back to space opera. The interesting thing about the particularly in terms of space opera is that the climatic scene is very personal between Kimball Kinnison and Marissa. He gets sent off into be completely unfindable. She has to go find him. Somebody in the chat says Karen and the Pirate Queen is the children's series. I think that's a wonderful idea. I'll have to tell her to write it. So
Yeah. The thing with Doc is good about making it personal.
yeah, in that way,
At
a
least
lot of
let me back to the people.
does become personal. There are these interludes of people needing to interact as people, as opposed to the giant space fleets and all that. Giant space fleets do. It's kind of boring after a while.
They do. And you need the interlude of why are we doing this? What are we intending to? Who are we as individuals, not just who are we as a civilization? And that's why I love Doc. You flip to Isaac Asimov, and a lot of his characters tend to be cardboard cutout archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
And Arthur Clarke, I read, I know my brain's gone blank. The one where the space probe comes through and they have to land on it briefly. Thank you. I read it for research, and there were exactly 4 character descriptions in the book. And 2 of them were describing 2 characters as Mutt and Jeff, and that's it. So they were still in a blank wall. They had no inner thought, no inner emotion. They were scientists doing science, but they weren't people.
Yeah. But then that you run into that with people who are trying to do science who don't come out of science. I think that
And usually for me, it's people who are trying to tell a morality tale. They have a theme they want to beat you over the head with, and they forget to entertain you with the story. I figure if I entertain you with the story, you're not going to pay attention to the themes and ethical questions and crap I throw at you that subverts your thinking until later.
yeah. And later is better.
Yeah. How about you, Michael?
I'm in agreement with all that. I'm having a really hard time hearing the question. Clarke, at least in his later work, got a little better with characterization and making people and telling stories. But the vast majority of his stuff, I loved it when I was younger, but now it kind of leaves me cold because there's just no humanity there.
Well, I would say the Children's End has a fair amount of humanity. And
I encountered young and it never really caught me. Some of the later Asimov, some of the later robots and the crossover back to Foundation, those books were interesting, but that's a much more mature Asimov writing about people again. And I have all.
To what extent then was Campbell sort of creating that? Because he certainly worked to get people a little more interested in people. In that Nightfall, which was his first story from Asimov, is really about the people, rather than about big, huge ideas. But
I think for all his faults, Campbell deserves a lot of respect for that. The guy was a piece of work in some ways, but he really did help to usher in the new wave and get people thinking about humanity in their stories and not just cool concepts and science. And I grew up on that era, and it's really imprinted on me more than the Golden Age stuff, which I also read, but which sort of just went by.
Yeah, well, creating Heinlein later was, I think, probably one of the more important things he did. And Heinlein has an awful lot of people in his stories.
Yeah. And Heinlein gave rise to my other most single favorite author, and that's David Drake.
Interesting.
And he was military SF with the Hammer Slammers books. But again, it was always about people. People put in impossible situations, people forced to make the least worst bad choice to survive.
Yep.
The Slammers books, other stuff. His fantasy, I don't necessarily get as deeply into. It never hooked me.
Mm-hmm.
But some of his characters just are there.
Well, military science fiction is almost always better when it's written by people who've been military and Drake.
Yeah.
So,
Although I don't. If you are writing military like the modern military, yes. If you are writing something completely new, I tend to disagree. Simply because I've had people come back to say, well, in your book you did X. But when I was in the U.S. Navy, well, buddy, we weren't talking about the U.S. Navy. I've actually modeled this on the Roman Republic and early Roman Imperial Navy. Just a cutie. And so I use a lot of early Roman Imperial, late Republic as my foundation, or especially my militaries. Or I'll invent entirely rank structures for fun, just because I can do something and it's not your time in the U.S. Navy. Because the U.S. Navy today bears no resemblance to the U.S. Navy 1 century ago or 2 centuries ago.
Yes.
Oh, good heavens.
Yes. She's going to have an interesting life. We have 4 other cats, including one who's 26 years old.
Yeah. Which is amazing. I have a 19-year-old kitty.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. She's very good at photobombing with just as Karen is. She has taken the cat.
Here's taking the cat.
The Pirate Queen is enraged by this. It looks like we actually have the chat on the side.
Yeah. The Pirate Queen. Hi, Karen.
she digression. She managed to get upstairs into the realm of the other cats last night. Was interesting.
Oops.
We've only had her for a week, so she's not adopted into the household yet. Actually, Liam, I'm not the food guy. I'm the person they like to lie on top of when they're destroying the world. The food comes either from me or Karen, but I'm the one they really like to just lie on.
There we go.
Bed rather than the food.
I am lap and occasionally feeding.
Yes. None of our cats are lap cats, but we digress. Yes.
Absolutely. So yeah, for me, I like people.
Who are you liking who's writing? Aside from yourself, who are you liking who's writing space operas?
I'm not really reading a lot right now because I'm working on some of the other projects. When I do research, I'll pick a theme and I'll go rabbit hole down TV tropes for an hour. But right now I'm doing a lot of research in thriller because I've been writing a bunch of thriller for a different set of projects outside of my normal space opera stuff. A friend of mine started the Thrill Ride magazine, and so I managed to put stories in the first 4 issues, and he's open call for year 2 right now, so I'm working on that, and then I'm writing some novels that spin those characters up into big projects. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Mm-hmm. Michael?
Is the question on what we're reading or what we're working on?
Both.
I got to split both. So I just recently read something called Rubicon by J.S. Hughes. Pretty good. It's pretty good. It's amazing. It had a weird ending that makes me hope there's another book coming. But it's really good mind-based. And I'm working on a couple of different things. There's a space opera disguised as an epic fantasy, and the others standard kind of space. Oh, Richard, you had to bring up his name.
Of course. Now, we gotta follow off the serial number so we don't get sued for copyright infringement.
Yes. Well, Terry did.
Yeah, I don't want her suing me either.
The Channer series certainly also has.
Yeah.
And for fun, my Corsac Fox books have lots of alien species, so when I did the Kickstart, I had a category people could insert themselves as a character, and one of the guys said, I want to be a cat, so I'm in the process of creating a cat species for book 5 for my friend in Finland, so that he can be the Lord of the Cats, because one does.
Well, even Doc Smith wrote cats into most strongly Vortex Blaster was Chick-fil-A.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Everything can be out there. The key with aliens is make them alien enough that they're not just people with nasal prosthetics while not making them entirely inscrutable.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of people who say
hard.
Version honestly is story to really do that. Read,
Yeah.
Campbell said something that thinks as well as a man, but not like a man.
Yep.
We can change that to human now.
Yeah. But you got your giant cyclopses, you got your sirens, you got everything.
Mm-hmm. Well, I sort of wonder whether cyclopses are evolutionarily a good idea, because it's really hard to get parallax with only one eye.
I would assume a non-predator-prey relationship would be required, because you don't need to be watching for predators and you aren't trying to hunt down prey. But yeah, David Drake said something years ago that Julius Caesar would have made a great science fiction writer. Just reading his Gallic tales.
Yeah.
And Drake's got a background in history. Yeah.
I'm sorry, fake funds. What can I say?
You do. So what other questions you got for us, Tom?
Well, dozens, but my brain is not as functional as it could be. What really needs space opera to continue to grab people's attention? Yes. As Richard comments, if sight is not your main focus as a sensory modality, the lack of binary
Yeah.
not necessarily a problem.
Yeah. For me, space opera, I usually get to envision, quote unquote, a better civilization than necessarily the one we have now. Because we might have seen the peak of modern civilization and we're sliding down the backside on a ramp right now.
That's an interesting question. What criterion are you measuring better on?
Absolutely.
The criteria.
The greatest good for the greatest number of people with the least harm to those that can't suffer the greater good.
But how can you tell? You know, there's an awful lot of nasty self-serving that goes on looking for the greater good, the greatest number.
Yeah. And until recently, I guess, my favorite thing these days, if more people went to prison for this shit, fewer people would go to prison for this shit.
Yeah.
My background is in political science and epistemology, unrelated, but they are, and I watch civilizations' underpinnings rotting and beginning to collapse, like a dam that has cracks in it. I live in Seattle. You live in Seattle. Do you remember the riots and the tear gas in 2020?
I didn't see them.
Oh. Yeah, my wife's old got tear gassed. The Seattle Police Department.
It's being reported, but a great deal of the reporting affects what people see, as Madison Lang pointed out in their book on how media change politics.
Yep.
And when Karen went down to Florida to visit her mother, she got a lot of people who aren't afraid to be living in Seattle and all the riots and stuff that's going on. It's just, yes, what they've been doing in the international district to the Chinese-owned businesses is just terrible. You didn't hear about that.
Yeah.
It was just terrible. But
yeah.
It gets reported. That's what people think is good.
Yep. Things are slowly coming apart, and there's nothing that's going to hold it together.
Well, you know, I think that we do have things that will hold it together, which is the uniqueness of the majority of people. But sometimes you have to really wake them up.
Yeah.
These then whop upside the head to make them say, pay attention.
More people whop upside the head. I agree with you on that.
Yeah. The needs for it not to be fatal, though, in the first place.
Yeah. I write science fiction because it's not here, not now.
And yet it reflects here and now.
Yeah. Doesn't have to. If I want to morality tales and educate people on being better people, then yes, I can do what Star Trek, the original series on Next Gen, did, was very subtly change a few things and beat you over the head with it.
Yeah.
Star Trek was always good with that.
I don't remember the title of the episode where the people were divided black and white on each side of their faces, and which side was which was important.
Yep.
I would say, though, that any era of science fiction reflects, or any piece of science fiction reflects the time it was written, whether the author intends it to or not. The choices of antagonist, protagonist, our settings are all largely dependent on our own experience of the world.
If you don't have something that the reader can identify with, you don't have a story.
Right. But I'm not as pessimistic as it seems, Blaze. I think people have been decrying the end of civilization ever since civilization began. And I think we'll find our way through all this. It's pretty bleak there right now, but I don't think we're sliding down the backside as much as coiling up the movement still.
John, you're not catching about half of what you're saying, I'm sorry.
And I admit, I think we're sliding down the backside. But
I think we're still climbing. We haven't reached the pinnacle yet.
And they just be temporary setbacks.
Yeah. But I think stories are how we get people through it all.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. We give them something to.
That civilizations don't, they evolve or devolve. And a lot of people have a weird understanding of evolution that Darwin actually said, talked about, just that things change rather than moving in a particular direction. Evolution is not directional, it's much more like bush growing out, parts that live and parts that don't.
I would like a utopia, please. And a utopia for everybody, and not just for the billionaires.
Yeah.
Would be nice.
Well, the Gwyn's walk away from us is very much that. Even if you had utopia for the majority of people, it might still be held.
Yeah. But again, for me, a utopia is you get up in the morning and you are free to commit art. Whatever your art is. Whatever brings you joy and pleasure without worry.
And without hurting other people.
And without hurting other people. Unless, of course, it's a consensual duality sort of thing.
Yes, well, there's a difference between pain and intense sensation.
Yeah. Too many people don't get to commit art. We're lucky here because we get to commit art. I get to write for a living. I don't have to get up in the morning.
I do.
Art. Art goes back to forward writing.
Yeah.
And I think storytelling goes back well to story and writing. So
Absolutely. Yeah. We need more storytelling.
One of my forms of art in that sense is the massage therapist, working with how people move and how people are. It's an important part of what I do. The goal of helping. What is the goal of art? I think the goal of art is to help people become more who they are.
To entertain them, to make them feel better, to give them better dreams.
I think to show people what we can be. A lot of literary fiction tends to show the worst of humanity. I like about science fiction that we get to show the best. And sometimes also the worst, but attention.
Villains and heroes, Bubba.
You know, art is one of those things that's it really varies what Marxist attempts to make art has its problems.
I didn't even catch any of what you just said.
I like the comment from Cheryl Alexander that art takes the personal and makes it universal. But it also takes the universal and makes it personal.
Yeah.
It's sometimes hard to know doing at any given time.
Yeah. The best do both at the same time.
So, we'll be getting to the end fairly soon. Any summing up that either of you would like to do?
I think Michael said it best. Science fiction shows us the best of what we can strive for and imagines how much better a place could be as we get there, when we get there, what we do with it.
Not just how much better, but how it could be.
Yeah.
You know, the thought experiments in science fiction work to show us what would happen if one thing was better and perhaps make something else worse.
Mm-hmm. What could it be?
Yeah. Which is also part of art.
Yeah.
Yes, and as somebody comments, what we don't reminds us of what we don't want to be. So, we have Bob showing up for
Okay. Do we have other questions
Do
from
you
the
want to
audience?
say anything about what you have coming out?
For me, every month this year, I've been publishing another novella in the Last Stand series, which is not Firefly Serenity, but a different take on a space western.
Okay.
I got the number, what are we in October? Number 10 is coming out day after tomorrow. The Corsac Fox books that Bob talked about earlier, number 2 comes out in November, 3 and 4 come out next summer. My next science officer book comes out in December. And then in January, I'm starting a new military space adventure series inspired by the original Star Trek. Pure gods, less magic, no time travel, but mission of the week sort of thing, called Marrakesh.
There weren't a whole lot of gods in the original Star Trek.
There were. I went back and looked at episodes, and it's amazing how many times some ultra-powerful, indescribable being showed up that was close enough to a god for their purposes. Not just Squire of Gothos, but Triskelion and all these other places. They go somewhere and encounter nigh unto gods.
And even Apollo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next year, this is bad.
Michael, do you have anything coming?
Not that's on the horizon yet. It's all still in the workbench stage.
Oh, and I also edit Boundary Shock Quarterly, which is a quarterly science fiction magazine. And the Science Fiction Holidays issue just came out this week. Plus, I did an anthology called Every Tomorrow Worse, which looks at not the apocalypse, but a slow apocalypse where things have gotten bad and people don't see getting better. And what do we do? So Every Tomorrow Worse.
Do you have open calls on those anthologies, or are they?
Whiteboard presents are open call. The Boundary Shock are by invitation. If people write science fiction, I'm really interested in talking to them about guest slots and future issues. Everything's themed. The next issue of Boundary Shock will be Gulliver's Other Travels. And I just got those stories from my people this week.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
It's important to know what's open and what's not.
Reach out if you write science fiction and want to talk about a guest slot. Michael.
And it's always worth remembering that PQ Press also publishes things that often have open calls. What's open at the moment, Bob?
Well, Tom, Michael, Blaze, it's about that time. You guys have been wonderful. And I think I'm going to go with Michael. Civilization still has a good, but it's a long, steep road with some steep splits on either side of that steep. And you can always fall off the edge if you aren't paying attention. And I am so glad to have both of you on here today. And Tom, as always, you bring a good guest to entertain. And just a reminder, Blaze, the first thing I ever published in space was in Alternative Truth. And we love doing it, and we have more Alternative Truth, Southern Edition, bless their hearts, being edited by Karen, who's somewhere telling Tom to get the hell off her computer.
Otherwise, she can't get the editing done.
She's taking care of that new cat.
Yep.
That woman and her cat. But you all take care. Any closing words from any of you?
Other than see you all next month. Thank you for being here.
Okay. Well, thank you all, and goodbye, and take care.